First, I want to return to the Voice debate and Liberal MP Julian Leeser. As you know, he courageously quit as Shadow Indigenous Affairs Minister earlier in the year. He quit the front bench so he could campaign for the yes vote, staying true to his beliefs. I asked him earlier about the Coalition's silly claim that Labor has secretly committed to a longer Uluru statement.
Well, Chris, as you know, I resigned as the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians and as the Shadow Attorney-General because I take a different view on the coming referendum to my colleagues, and I respect that they've taken a different view to me on this. I think the Uluru statement is not relevant to what we're voting on at this referendum. We are voting on one new section to the Constitution which will recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Constitution. It'll provide for a new committee to be called The Voice. The purpose of The Voice will be to make representations on policies and laws that affect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and that listening to those representations should lead to improvements in outcomes in relation to education, employment, healthcare and housing. That's what this referendum is about. It's not about all the extraneous issues that people involved in the No campaign keep raising.
Sure, but they're raising them to discredit the Voice, and the Uluru statement is important. It's because it's where Indigenous Australia put in writing its call to have a voice, and obviously the Coalition got involved in this whole conspiracy theory that it was really a secret document of 26 pages calling for all sorts of other different things. I mean, it was such an extravagant scare campaign aimed at damaging the Voice.
I think the Aboriginal leaders who are involved at the Uluru statement have said that it is the one page and that those documents were working papers from the various meetings that took place around the country. But regardless, we are not voting on the Uluru statement. It is not relevant to the referendum. The Voice was developed before the Uluru statement. It was developed by Indigenous leaders like Noel Pearson, talking with constitutional conservatives like myself, like Greg Craven, like Anne Toomey and others, about finding a way forward to recognise Indigenous people in the Constitution and find a practical way to improve outcomes on the ground. And that's what this is all about. It's why I'm a supporter of the Yes case, because symbolic recognition is one thing, but practical recognition is where we get actual improvements on the ground. And that's what, as a Liberal, I've always been in favour of.
But how do you feel as a Liberal seeing your own side in Parliament running this extended secret Uluru document argument? Is it dispiriting, or do you try and counter that in public debate yourself?
Well, look, I just keep drawing people back to the provisions that we're actually voting for, because I think there's a lot of noise in this referendum debate, Chris, as you know. And I think, you know, we're hearing all sorts of claims. I mean, the Uluru statement is many pages. We're hearing things about submarines and parking tickets. We're hearing about welcomes to country. I'm waiting until we hear complaints about dot paintings. None of those things are relevant to what we're actually voting on. We're voting on one new section to the Constitution to recognise Indigenous Australians, to create a new body so we can listen better to them in order that we can get better outcomes and save the Commonwealth some money and ensure that we're actually shifting the dial in education, employment, healthcare and housing.
So you believe this latest raising of welcomes to country is another diversion? I mean, it seems to me that the No campaign is suggesting you can vote no to express your point of view on everything, including welcomes to country or the cost of living at the moment. They're talking about anything but the Voice.
I think that's right, and I think that actually should give Australians heart. If there was a real problem with the provisions that have been put forward, the No campaign would have a laser-like focus on the constitutional amendment. The fact that people arguing the No case are arguing about everything but the constitutional amendment indicates that when Australians actually look at what we're voting for, that it is a small change to the Constitution. It's one new section of the Constitution. It's a section that completes the Constitution. It's a section that recognises Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians, and importantly, it's a section that provides us a pathway to make better policy about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians by actually listening to them so that we're ground truthing those policies in community. That's what this should all be about. That's where the debate should be. That's certainly been the focus of my advocacy.
Could a Voice deliver a treaty? Could a Voice deliver reparations?
Well, Chris, I think even raising these issues is not helpful because they're not on the ballot paper, and the answer to those questions is no. The Voice is the mechanism that we've talked about before. It's a mechanism for consultation with Aboriginal people. In relation to treaty, when you read the Uluru Statement, that is under a completely separate body, the Makarrata Commission. Even if the referendum is unsuccessful, the government can still proceed to treaty. Treaty and reparations have nothing to do with what Australians are voting for on referendum day. They are simply voting about recognising Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians and putting a new body in the Constitution. A body, I might add, that is urgently needed because of the continued failure in relation to closing the gap. We only had a Productivity Commission report a couple of weeks ago that says government is still not listening, despite all of the good closing the gap refresh that happened, still not listening to Indigenous people about the implementation of the closing the gap refresh. And that's leading to disastrous outcomes on the ground, to a suicide rate 2.5 times that of the national average, to an unemployment rate, even in an employment market as buoyant as this one, 9 times the national average. Looking at Aboriginal life expectancy, 8 years lower than the rest of the population. Looking at school and university completion rates, much lower than the rest of the population. These are not good statistics. It's important that we address them. It's important that we look at structural ways to do so. I think The Voice provides us with an opportunity to make better policy and get better outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians, and that's what this debate should be about.
Thanks for joining us, Julian.
Thanks, Chris.